Well, welcome everybody to 2017. Wow, are we getting old, Denny?
You're getting
Today
old, right?
we're going to have one of my good friends on, Keith Bromley of IXIA, Keysight Technologies, Anui, whatever, all of those combined now into one big, wonderful technology company. And of course, our ever wonderful host, Dr. Denny Mew.
Thank you, Tim. Well, let me start off by saying that this is one of the LMTV show that I really look forward to because we get to talk about tabs, and but of course with the premise that we won't talk about span ports. So I'm going to mute you for a minute, Tim. Anyway, we have today with us Keith Bromley, who is a marketing manager for IXIA. Let me just quickly talk about IXIA being a very interesting company. It is as close to a total solutions company now as we can imagine. They're starting with the analysis tools, which IXIA is known for. But since then, they have acquired Anui, which makes I guess we could call that a packet broker, right? Hate that name. But it's a box that sits between the tools and the tabs. So we get to talk about tabs today. But in addition, Keith is been with the company now. We've been in IXIA now for about 4 years, and came with Anui. And so welcome to the show, Keith.
Oh, thank you. Great to be here. This is like my second one I've done. I'm excited about it. Last time we talked about parts of visibility, so I'm looking forward to talking about like the data access portion now, where you can actually grab the monitoring data before it goes on to the packet broker and the tools. So
yeah,
so I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk about what we're gonna focus today is the customers who actually make the right decision and buy all the pieces that we believe will give them visibility to the network. Now the question is, how do they actually implement that, right? Is that true?
Yeah, exactly. So again, it all starts with taps. We all know that, hopefully. Some people are still using span ports, but it really starts with tap because the right data gives you the right information that you can process. So if you start with data that's bad, it's not going to get any better from there.
Yeah, I wonder. Just kind of make the connection with the audience out there. I wonder if we could just kind of run down on the things that people typically do wrong with taps.
Well, the first thing is, especially what I've seen from customers, you got to have the right tap, right? So a tap is not a tap. You've got taps that are typically for out-of-band solutions like a IDS or Wireshark or some sort of monitoring tool there. But then you've got some people would hate this in my organization, but you got a special purpose tap called a bypass switch that lets you deploy that tap inline. So basically you've got built-in failover capability besides just the ability to get the data and funnel it over to an inline security tool or an inline packet broker. And then you've got something called a virtual tap. You've got your virtual data center, but unless you put a tap at the top of the rack, or if you do that, you're still not going to see much because as Gartner and some of these others have shown 80% of the traffic is east-west traffic. So how do you get in there and get that data center traffic? And then I was just at RSA 2017 last week, and a guy walked up to me and asked me and said, I've got my cloud network now. I love it. I'm spinning up applications left, right, center, spinning them down, but I have no visibility into my cloud network. How do I tap into that? How do I get access to that cloud data? Again, it starts with some sort of access device, tap, or whatever you want to call it.
Now, if you this is an interesting point. So if you're actually using the cloud, so what is the answer? If I'm the customer, I'm using the cloud, I'm pushing all my problems to Amazon, right? Mm-hmm. I'm saying this is good. I'm paying my bills every month. I'm done, right? And then all of a sudden something doesn't work. What do? I can't just pick up a phone and call somebody.
That's right. Yeah. You're blind. And then, you buy these cloud services, Amazon or whoever, I won't pick on anybody, but what's the service level agreement that you've negotiated? And are they even meeting it? How do you know? If you're not pulling any of that data, who knows? You've got an SLA with them and they may or may not be anywhere close to delivering that amount of traffic and throughput for you and bandwidth.
But that's the point. It's a cloud network. I don't have ownership to that. How do I? But even if I know the answer, even if I say I want a tap to be put in the network, how do I actually do that? There's no way to do that, right?
Well, it depends on the network. Actually, IXIA does have a solution for that.
Oh,
And
okay.
basically, software agent, so you can install a software agent in the network to pull data from it, and then you can go and do another software agent. We loosely call it like a listener. You can go install that on a virtual tool. So, put it on one of your virtual tools, and you've got the capture device that can then send that over to the tool that's listening for that specific information, because there's also a management system that lets you configure different types of information and send them to different listeners. So, yeah, you can actually have like a tap solution.
Okay. All right.
It's not traditional. It's not like a physical tap we've been used to, and you stick it in the network and you just use a prism and make a copy and send that out a monitoring port. But again, it's giving you access to the data you need.
It's a visibility portal.
Hey, Tim,
Yes.
we have a list of items that we want to run down, but before we do that, I will give you. I was only kidding when I said that I would mute you for the entire show. We were talking about how people were spending tens of millions of dollars to upgrade the network, and then something missing from that, right?
Well, I've had so many people say, well, I'm moving to SDN. I don't have to have visibility. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're separating the data plane from the management plane, and now you have absolutely no visibility. You don't know what's going on in your network. Like Keith pointed out, virtual world, you're in a cloud. If you're not even watching what's going in and coming out of the cloud to your sites, you're in kind of a never land. And again, with so many security events, the other day I'm actually writing a thing, and Keith and I are going to work on some of it together. But the number of attacks that can go on in your network, and if you're not watching it, you'll never notice that something's wrong. You'll never notice that you've got this IP address in China that's sucking data out of your server at 4 a.m. in the morning if you're not watching. And people forget that, and they'll go out and they'll buy they'll spend $100,000 on a packet broker, okay, a filter, an advanced filtering technology. And then they're going to hook it up to an alternate device other than a tap to see everything. And a tap just doesn't let you see everything. It lets you see it in relative time, which is extremely important because a lot of our application today are real-time protocols. They flow under the RTB format. So I can't think of a reason not to put taps in a network so you can see it and find where your problems are. Because without that, you're visible. You're blinder. You got blinders on. And Keith knows I'm an advocate for taps. I've been an advocate for taps since I built one of the first ones back in 1976. It was a RS-232 and a V35 tap, but we didn't have LAN in those days. So all we had was WAN. And but even back then, I would go to companies and they would say, well, we can't see what's going out. I'm like, well, you need a tap. And they're like, what's a tap going to do? And then once they saw it, they were like, wow. And I think if someone, and Keith, I think any of your salesmen would do this. If someone said, well, I don't know, never seen data through a tap. Well, here, I got one in my briefcase. Let's plug it in and let's watch the data, even just from your desktop. You would be amazed at what you see just hooking a tap up to your desktop, your notebook computer, and plugging your line into it and watching the traffic. It'll blow your mind. You'll be saying, I got a bunch of IPv6 traffic, but I'm not doing IPv6. Just right away, that bounces right out. And so if you're not looking in your network for aberrant behavior, well, first off, you got to find out what's normal. When you and I go to the doctor, what's the first thing he does? Take your temperature, look in your eyes, take your blood pressure, listen to your heart, because he knows there's a norm. But your network has its own norm, its own physiology. And if you don't know that, you're never going to know if there's a problem. And a tap is the only truly accessible methodology for that. And I don't care if it's a virtual tap or a real tap. You mentioned earlier that it's not really real time. It doesn't matter. You still need to see what you can see, even if it's only a small amount, even if it's delayed. Just having any visibility, especially in the cloud. Oh my gosh, the cloud. That a friend of mine once told me that he didn't believe in anything. And I said, well, that's sad. You got to believe in something. And if you aren't looking in the cloud, you really have to believe that it's perfect and then nothing is ever going to go wrong with it. So I'm a huge advocate of taps.
Hey, Keith, so before I interrupted you, you were kind of giving us a rundown of the terminology. So at the top is what we would call a physical tap, something that you break the line, you insert a device, right? It's an inline device, not necessarily passive, but some of them are. And then there's also a variant of that, which is the bypass switch. And then finally, we talked about the virtual tap, which is basically something that you would use in a virtualized environment, such as the cloud, right? So I want to go back and talk a little bit about fail safe. I think this is the question that most people have: is that what makes the tap fail safe? Because in the case of in the simplest world, where you have an optical tap, you have a piece of fiber, you put a splitter in there, you take a little bit of light out of that. That's by definition fail safe. But what makes a non-optical tap fail safe?
There's basically, and I can't get too technical into it, but there's a failover mechanism in the bypass switch, basically like from my older days in college, like a shunt or a coil where you fail stuff over. And so what's going on with the bypass switch is it's sending out a little heartbeat message over to whether it's connected to a tool or to a network packet broker, but it sends this little message out to that device and checks to see if there's anything out there. It's supposed to get a response. If it doesn't get a response, it does a retry. And if it still doesn't get a response then, and this is configurable as to how many retries you want to do, but then it's going to kick, the bypass switch will kick in the failover mechanism. And you can either have it fail over, fail close. It depends on your level of risk. I think most people are going to have it fail over so that the traffic continues on down the line. Because if you don't, then basically you stop all traffic right there at the bypass switch. Nothing goes through. So you've got to make that choice. Is it more important to possibly have some data that's got a security risk to it, maybe no problems in it all, but a potential of a risk? Or do you want to shut your network down? And if you've got e-commerce or anything going on like that, then you're basically down and out with no transactions happening, depending on where the bypass switch is. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I can't go into all the details of the mechanism for failover. That's above my pay grade, but yeah, there's basically a switch over in there, and then it will switch back once it detects that the tool is out and fail back.
And I guess the point I'm getting at is that you might, people might as well accept that a tap is a network element in that sense, because especially in the case of gigabit taps, electrical gigabit taps, you are terminating the line. There's no way to actually do it the old way, where you just take signal out of an electrical line and call that a tap. You're actually terminating the gigabit line and regenerating it, right? So, so the design, so this makes this puts a lot of burden on the manufacturer, and so when people choose tap, they really have to do the homework.
Yes. Right? Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
One guy, one manufacturer's failover doesn't mean, it might not be the same as the other one.
Well, and even the terminology can get a little different too. People sometimes have a different terminology for what failover and fail open, what fail close means.
Yeah.
So you sort of got to make sure you know which one it is and test it out before you implement that. And then even tap. So I want to ask you guys this: what is the definition of a tap? Is it a test access point? Or is tap just a generic name from like wiretap? Because I get a whole bunch of people asking me that question too. And I'm like, well, I think it's a test access point, but I want to see what you guys say on that one.
Tim?
Well, taps go back to the old days when an operator would tap and that's where the word I think started as a generic conversation word, is they would tap into a line. And we're talking back in the operator days. They would make sure the line was open, and they had a Bell 310, big old freaking plug thing they'd plug in to see. But back in the 70s, when we started building data taps, we call them test access points. Okay. And so you'll hear people kind of run back and forth on that. But really what it gives you is access to your network. It's a very common acronym, but like you said, it does a lot more. Now, the one thing you don't want to have in a network is a failure point. You don't want a tap device to be a failure point. You also don't want your tap device to be an active device. There's supposed to be no IP address. They're supposed to remain dormant. You have the bypass taps, you have the regular taps, and an standard aggregation tap. And so to me, when I started using taps again, you guys weren't born yet. Even Denny was still in shorts. We thought that
I'm still in shorts.
Being able to get in a network was like we were tapping into the flow of the network. So that's how we stuck with tap. And that's what it really is. It's a test access point, or I've always said it's a visualization point.
Yeah.
Okay. Or
way to get
a
access.
VAP as a TAP, a visualization access point.
Yeah, but I think I think this is an important conversation. I think that our goal should be to help our audience elevate the discourse, right?
Yes.
So that they can actually understand that I mean, like even listening to Tim, you know, he started with tap as in the old days where you have, you know, where you plug wires and you're making telephone call physically. But of course, there's also the tap as in a telephone lines and where you have a pickup coil. That's really the tap that I remember. And of course, then it kind of got into where you have a fiber optics and you take a splitter and you're taking light out of that. But I think the most important thing that from Tim's comment is what is the definition of an active element? And in his definition, it has to do with IP.
Yes.
And not necessarily have to do with whether or not power is supplied to the tap. I think modern days taps require power. Okay. I think that, you know, we have to go from the idea of a box that just sits there, doesn't require power, and the only way that it can fail if you step on it. I think that's a very special case that applies to fibers. But everything else that we're doing now that are not optical, I believe requires power. But I think in Tim's terminology is that power is okay as long as you design in the fail-safe mechanism. But what he doesn't want is that it becomes a active network element, so that you can so they can hack. Is that true, Tim? Did I kind of explain that correctly?
And again, in photonics, when you're talking about, you know, the light wave itself, by even regenerating it or even reflecting it or tapping into it, you actually do use power. You're taking power away from the signal. So in a relative sense, we're always messing with power. But taps today are designed, most of them are designed to have 2 power supplies, just like your Cisco switch or your router or your server. And of course, if you lose the network, you lose power, everything goes down until you restore power, one way or the other, either backup power. And I have a friend of mine that was telling me, I got taps, but I got to have all this backup. And I said, what's your backup power supply for your network? And he's like, well, I don't have one. I said, then don't worry about backup power for a tap. You're not going to have a network. So, you know, everything has to be put in perspective. So you're actually right, Denny. Today, most taps have power in them. And you do have power almost in everything you put in networks today.
Well, and then another thing that pops up too is you just mentioned, Tim, was like the light, splitting the light. So I've run into engineers out there who didn't know that there's taps with different split ratios as well. So you can have like you can have like 30-20, 30-70, 20-80, 50-50, 60-40, even 90-10, and they don't realize, hey, there's different light ratios out there. So depending upon what my network is, where I'm putting this in, how much light budget I have, there is a different type of tap to help me out in whatever situation I've got.
Absolutely. And when you're dealing in the photonic world, you do have to understand that you do have a budget. You have an amount of light that you can tap into without getting into the noise band. Optical world in photonics, you do have a much more important noise band you have to watch out for. So you don't want to put a 90-10 in and hope make sure you get the 10 to your monitoring device, not the 10 to your network, because it won't work. And I've seen that happen so many times. But you're absolutely right. You got to think. This is, even though it's a simple device, but it gives you so much power. And yeah, you got to think a little bit about it. But I just don't understand why people fail to invest. I mean, I've had customers call me and say, I've got my packet broker and I can't see this and this. And I'm like, well, what's feeding it? I said, do you have a tap? Well, no. Well, then any information you get, you should be happy with, because you put it in the wrong spot.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go with what you just said, wrong spot. So I think let's just say that we have the discussions on the different kinds of taps. We have the discussions on what makes a good tap, how you educate yourself to understand the different parameters that makes a good tap. So assuming that you now have the good tap, assuming that you're ready to deploy, what's your first consideration, Keith?
To me, where are you going to put the tap? So, do you want to tap at the edge of the network? Do you want to tap in the core? What is the data that you need for the monitoring tool, right? So, I mean, depending on the type of data, is it security data? Is it troubleshooting data for like Wireshark, or is it information for your compliance tools, whatever? What type of data do you need? But then really, where do you put that tap? Because where you tap will give you different types of data. And then the second thing right after that is, where are you tapping? Because if you're tapping at the edge, you're tapping at the next segment, you're tapping at the core, you could be tapping data 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 times. Now you got this amount of duplicate data running through your network over to your monitoring tools. So then you need a packet broker that's going to be able to do the deduplication. But then it's got the larger issue, and Tim and I have actually talked about this before. Sometimes you want to turn the deduplication capability on your network packet broker off, just so you can see, are you getting a lot of duplicate data? And if you are, maybe it's something you need to go investigate as to where your data is coming from, because it could be a diagnostic tool for that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And in networking, you never assume anything, or it will bite you. Because if you assume I don't have duplicate packets, so I'm going to turn on a duplicate packet filter, you may have duplicate packets, and that could be the core of a lot of problems, major problems. But as you pointed out, Keith, you've got to talk about, and I want to be clear about this. There are people that build devices they call taps, because we don't have a uniform definition in our technology. In some cases, they're nothing but switches. They're just using a switch module in there. And again, we're going back into the world of, we're getting something, but we're not sure what we're getting.
Well, I have elderly parents, and I have to take them to see the doctors regularly, and this is not unlike that case where the doctor always asks you to bring all the medicines that you take, medicines and supplements, because they just want to know what solutions are you subscribing, because sometimes the solutions mask the problem, right? So this is good conversation here. So Keith, we're always dealing with constraints, right? I mean, the real world is full of constraints.
Exactly.
So my guess is that in a network, the constraints has to do with the amount of resources that you can deploy, a number of taps you can buy. But assuming that you got all that out of the way, you got plenty of taps, the constraint now becomes, when do you take the network down so you can install inline device, right? So let's just get a rundown. If if there's only so many things you can do, and you really want to look at your network, where should I put the taps?
Well, again, it depends on what you need, and maybe Tim could tell you better, but what we've seen our customers doing a lot is you're going to tap at the ingress, egress of your network, and then you're going to tap at different choke points. You also might, if you're trying to rely on like data from span ports or something, span ports have some problems there, so you may actually want to skip getting data from your span switch and put a tap right there in the core, or a couple taps, depending on the bidirectional. But that's typically what I've seen people spend a lot of time on is ingress, egress, and then choke points. That's typically where you're going to have problems arising from.
What defines choke points? Ingress, egress, I understand, but what defines a choke point?
It depends on if you're, like one of the cases I've seen is an acquisition, company acquisitions. So you've got the data network from one company, you get the data network from the other, and then there's like a go between the two. So it can become a choke point depending on how much bandwidth you're running between the two systems, or, and so you want a tap there. So it's essentially like a special purpose ingress egress point, but it's not truly that because it's still within your network. So that's one area. Another one could be like if you have worldwide operations, and again, you've got different networks out there, different countries. Same type of thing where you may have choke points going into the country or out of the country or something like that. Or if you've got, I don't know what another good one is, but I've seen it where if you've got a special network running within your network or beside your typical network, you want to tap that sometimes, because if you've got any data crossing over or any crossover points where you may get a mixture of data, like a gateway or something, and it's being inspected by security tools to make sure that the data is good going both directions. That could be another one where you want to put a tap again so that you've got that access. Tim, maybe you got better. You're the master.
No, I'm not.
See what I see.
I just tell people wherever you think there's mystery. I like to tell people if you got a big switch or a router, put it on the ingress and egress side of that. Because one of the first things you have to provide in an event there's a major problem in your network is what we call a dependence list. And a dependencies list is what device is handling what IP addresses, for one thing. That's the first thing I do. Second thing I ask is for IP spread. But for instance, I had one guy was telling me that a switch was failing. He was having all kinds of problems. And I said, well, show me your dependency. Show me which IP addresses are on which port on that switch. Well, after we started doing some studying, he had one port on the switch that had 1,200 IP addresses. And the rest of them had like 20 or 30 on it. Well, yeah, you were pretty much putting a huge load on that switch for that one port. And of course, that was loading down that entire network, because every frame that goes down a LAN has to be touched by every device on there. Every NIC card looks at every frame going down that line. So it starts choking up. It's got too much data flow in it. Okay, so that's a choke point. Anytime you see something like that, that's a choke point. I don't call them choke points. I call them worry points. I'm worried about what's going on there.
Exactly.
So that's where I put my tap.
Well, I have known Tim for a long time, and so he's a very thoughtful man. And so the thing that he always explained to me is measure twice, cut once. Except when it comes to tap. When it comes to tap, it's always shoot first, ask questions later.
There you go.
Hey, Steve, we should close the show. Not that we have any reason to close the show, but I just want to keep it to around 30 minutes so people can actually watch this and not push it back to the weekends.
Okay.
So give us, before I give you the final words, I want to invite you back and talk about packet bookers.
Sounds good. We'd love to.
I'm going to say that we've done what we need to do to explain to people about taps, where they should put them. But now the question is, once you get the data, what do you do with that?
Right? Exactly.
Okay.
One other point I wanted to make, though, on my website, IXIAcom.com, so IXICom.com, there's more white papers, there's white papers out there. There's more information available if they want to go look at it. Anybody wants to go look at it for taps, just go to the resource page on the website, and you can find all sorts of information.
Keith, can I ask you to just send me those links? You know, like if you could recommend a few white paper, I'll put that in the article.
I can do that.
And then that way, it's not that I'm not saying that people are lazy. I'm just saying that people have priorities. Okay, I learned not to say that.
They have a priority over a tab. Come on.
I want to point out also that Keith has written several articles for Love My Tool. We discuss all aspects of visibility, network visibility, tools being deployed appropriately, and the usability of the tools that are deployed, which is an essential item. You put something out there too complex, people aren't going to want to use it because it's scary. So we want to eliminate that problem. And like I said, so also, Keith, you've got at least 6 articles, I know maybe 7 on Love My Tool. And to make one point, Keith and I both are working on a pretty good paper here that I think is going to help people kind of understand the next step. You got the data. Now what do I do with it?
Yeah. You
know, I've got an encyclopedia, but I want to look up certain parts of it. And of course, that's when we move into the packet broker world. Again, not my favorite term, because to me that delimits what really is a tremendous device that we've had in the industry that helps us focus on what we need.
It is what it's called. Okay. Hey, Tim, before I close the show, I do want to give you a chance to do a shout out. We had some discussions in the last couple of days about, you know, what Love My Tool means, especially to some of our sponsors. And I just want to point out that IXIA is one of our favorite sponsors. Because it just turns out that it's now a merger of a number of companies that we really have a long history with in New and Optics, you know, full of really good people, and they really understands how to reach out to the customers, to the community. Always contribute first, right? Always try to think about how I can help the people out there who, and I always said that our job is to make sure that they understand that they're not alone, that their problem, we have seen the problem, we have seen the solution. So talk to our sponsors, talk to people who look at Love My Tool and say, how do I use this? Is, you know, why can't I just do what I do buying Google keywords?
Yeah, well, ask any SEO about that. I think IXIA and before IXIA NUI have been great partners because they know how to use Love My Tool. Love My Tool is a platform. It's like going to a show. When you go to a show, you put your name up and you put products out and literature out and you engage people in conversation. You would never go to a show and not put up your name of your company or not have brochures or not be there to engage anybody. That would be a total waste of your time and money. Well, Keith and his team have always engaged Love My Tool and engaged their customers through Love My Tool. Love My Tool is a platform. You want to stand up and shout about your technology, and we don't like just junk. That's one thing Keith and I have always had in common is we want to give people good, valuable information. And what we look at is if you have this problem, we have this solution. We can make your life easier, whether you're a network manager, an application person, a server manager, a security person. And I got to say that my relationship with Keith and has really helped me grow and learn more about security. That's kind of been my focus now for a few years. I've never gotten too far away from my background, but Love My Tool is a platform. Don't you agree, Keith? I mean, it's a place to shout about what you do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you guys have all sorts of industry experience. I mean, we've got some too. So we bring it, you bring all the skill and the expertise. There's other vendors that are on the Love My Tool website. They're bringing their experience. So yeah, it's one of the things I like. You can come and you can talk and you can discuss and you can pass ideas and information around. And, you know, like I'll talk about my company, but when I'm talking about stuff, I'm not trying to really sell something. I'm trying to have a discussion about technology and solutions. And that's what everybody else is doing. And that, to me, it's great. That's, you know, I do have an engineering background. I got away from it years ago and went to the dark side into product management and marketing, but still it's about the technology. To me, it really is the right solution, or as Scotty on Star Trek used to say, the right tool for the right job. Whatever it is, that's it.
So we
Okay, well.
Unless you're a Star Wars guy, and then the Force is with you as long as it's the right tool.
That's right.
All right. Okay.
The Force will be with you if you have the right tool.
There you go.
Okay, Keith. Thanks for coming. And now just remember, we have a date for the next one. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you. Hey,
All
Tim.
right,
everybody be blessed. Everybody be safe.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. And thank you, everyone. And we'll see you the next time. Bye-bye.